I know I gave this episode a bit of a clickbaity title for the Public Relations Podcast, which I think you know by now is a pretty blunt and honest show. But you know what? I think this title is actually true. There is a secret to increase the chances of a pitch being accepted by a huge amount, and I've banged on about this probably for over a decade, if not more, and I was talking about it on LinkedIn last week as well. And I just see this happening over and over again. The mistake can be avoided if you read, frankly, the comms textbooks. But not enough people seem to have actually been reading these textbooks. And I'm not just talking about beginners as well. I'm talking about across the board because it just amazes me how many people are doing this. Plus, this problem can now be helped so much by AI as well. So let me run through what this problem is and try and see if I can share some solutions as well. To illustrate it, let me share what happened, first of all, over the last few days. But this is actually just one example because I get these sorts of pitches all the time for the show. So I received a pitch, to appear on the podcast. I'm no different to any other podcast in that respect or any other content creator. The pitch had in the opening line, "I love your podcast," which of course immediately you're going to like. I mean, who isn't going to like that kind of thing? It could have said, "I love your makeup influencer feed." I don't know. I need some. Your tech expertise or your national newspaper, whatever it was. But then it started off well, but then it got worse. It said, "Do you take guests?" Well, considering I've spoken to loads of people on the show, some brilliant people as well, including possibly you, this broke the credibility of this pitch straight away. They clearly don't like the show. They clearly haven't listened to any episodes. And frankly, even if they hadn't sat through loads of them, they would have found their answer by listening to the first 20 seconds of the past few episodes. I've done that before. I would much rather actually that they'd pitched me cold and not said anything than broken that trust. I mean, this might sound really pedantic, but think about it this way, right? It might sound like the ramblings of an old journalist in PR, but we're all human. Whether we're in comms, whether in PR or journalism or in daily life, the moment you start to break the trust with someone, you start to question everything about their claim. You get that niggling feeling. Whether their story and their pitch is even real, whether they really have got the credibility that they claim to have, or whether they're just all mouth. Pitching is partly about gaining trust. So they'd failed at this first step, but it actually then got worse. Then they proceeded to list what they could have talked about. A list of generic copy and pasted topics, which frankly anyone could have talked about. But most importantly, none of these match what I do in the podcast, which is to talk about frontline comms with people who are actually doing it today. These are advice pieces, thought leader ideas. And there's a lot of great podcasts out there doing that sort of thing, really good podcasts. But as I think you know if you listen to this show, I focus on people who are actually doing it today, not just sharing general comms advice about big ideas. It's what they're experiencing right now, what they're actually seeing when they put the phone down after talking to a client today. I speak to them shortly after that. So it's what they're seeing right now. Now, if I was pitching to a newspaper, I would have approached this by looking at what content they actually needed, like my show. What has the paper done before? What angle do they take? If I'm pitching to someone big, I was talking to someone who's pitching to a morning show the other day. I'd spend a little bit of time looking at this to work out exactly what they need. I'd look at what they're doing, look at who the producers are, look at what kind of content they normally take, look at what language they use, what do they like, what are the patterns that you're looking at. And this might sound like, oh gosh, this is just going to take some time. But even on a smaller pitch, you haven't got to spend days doing this. Like, say with my podcast, you could do it really, really quickly. You could achieve so much more if you took literally 2 minutes of time to see what my podcast was about. And I'm sure in the case of many, many other content creators as well. As I say, I know there's a lot of pressure to get stuff done and get a pitch out, but how long is 2 minutes of research when that could have turned a completely wasted pitch, which got electronically spiked immediately into something that I might have used? I talk about research and not everyone does it. But I even have a page which explains exactly who I look for and what topics I take. Not every outlet is going to have this kind of thing. But I do, and there's plenty of people, even on magazines, that will have submission guidelines that lays out what they're actually looking for to help you do it. And people aren't even looking at this stuff. So if we put it in simple terms, wouldn't your organization or boss be happier if you actually got results? Now, I've talked before in the podcast about this kind of manual approach to research and of connecting the dots between your story and with what an outlet is looking for and trying to find those links between them. But then when I was looking at this and ranting about it, as you can tell, I suddenly thought to myself, well, surely you could use AI to do this quicker. Well, let me show you what I found. I'm going to bring it up on the screen. But I did just want to say, while I've got your attention, because you clearly are a listener to the Public Relations Podcast, that I wanted to let you know that I am now going to be trialing a new daily newsletter with ideas and tips to try each day to enhance your comms day, Monday to Thursday. There's going to be mindset stuff. There's going to be strategies and odd bits of news that I think we can use, not just news for the sake of it. There's going to be tips I've got from talking to some of my amazing guests on the show as well. Yes, I take guests. If you'd like to get it, even if you're already on the more traditional newsletter as part of the Public Relations Podcast, then click on the publicrelationspodcast.com, go to the subscribe page, you'll see the option at the top, and then fill out the form and select the PR Bites option. Now, this is even if you're already on the traditional newspaper. If you enter your details again, click on that, it will add you to that list, and I'm going to be starting that very soon. But let's go back to the AI. If you're watching the video version of this podcast, I'm going to put this up on the screen so you can actually see what ChatGPT came up with. But if you are listening to the audio version, then I am going to try and describe some of this to you. So what I did was this. I literally copy and pasted my guest page from my website site to GPT. And then I pasted in their pitch and I said, okay, what could they have done better? And the only words it says, GPT's reply was this. The pitch provided for the public relations podcast indeed missed several key points that are crucial for aligning with the podcast's unique format and focus. Here's a breakdown of where it went wrong. So immediately, even ChatGPT was going, this is just completely bad pitch. The first one was, it says, they focused on a personal story over current PR work. The pitch emphasized the personal journey and achievements of the pitcher more than the current specific public relations or communications project, which is something I very clearly state in my goal. There was a lack of specific current projects. Again, I look at things going on right now. There was a mismatch in content style and length. Notice that it's just picking these out straight away just by comparing the two. The podcast is described as having a very casual voice note style, which it does indeed. It's short. The pitch does not acknowledge that format, offering broader topics that seem more suited for a traditional long-form interview. So again, completely missed the point. And finally, the overemphasis on the promotional aspect. The podcast seems to value practical, actionable insights into PR and comms rather than promotional talks. So, it failed on so many levels. Then it listed a whole different ways of how it could have been improved, like highlighting current PR initiatives, applying to the podcast style, blah, blah, blah. But what was really interesting, and I didn't actually ask it to do this, was it then rewrote the pitch, which I thought was fascinating. And what it says is, good morning. I'm reaching out as a long-time listener of the Public Relations Podcast. Fine, same approach as before. But then it said, and a professional deeply embedded in the PR field. Immediately, they're telling me things I want to hear. Currently, it says here, I'm spearheading an innovative PR campaign for, and then it entered a placeholder, because of course this person hasn't provided anything which is useful like that, where we're navigating specific challenge or strategy, placeholder again. I believe a discussion around this could offer real-time, practical insights to your audience, fitting perfectly into your concise and raw chat format. They've basically answered all the points that I'm looking for. You know, one of the things that I often say with this kind of stuff is that any kind of content creator has a mental checklist. They might have it written down, but often it's a mental checklist about what they actually want to run. You know, and it doesn't matter whether you're not necessarily going to know all the points, okay? The reality is sometimes it's going to be even because they got out of bed the wrong side this morning that it's going to change it. But there's an awful lot you can do to actually try and tick off as many of those boxes as possible. It's all about researching. It's all about knowing what that outlet wants. What do they take? What is the angle they want? What content do they run? Who are they targeted at? The point is, a few seconds of research could turn, I think, many, many pitches out there from being pitches that are immediately spiked and deleted to one that is considered and used. The spray and pray approach might work with some outlets, but do you want to go for the kind of the generic outlets, which are tending to sound a bit like others? Or do you want to try and get it into something which has got a bit niche or engaged following? You know, I certainly look at this podcast and I hope, I do my best on this one. I hope that I'm really specifically targeting a particular group of people, and I hope it is something that people engage with. I've certainly seen a very loyal following to the show. I know I run on about this because I'm pretty passionate about it. Every organization that I see, and I don't think I've ever found a single organization that isn't like this, has a good story that could be pitched. And yet you see even the best stories so badly pitched, or missing the story based on what the outlet might need and slanting it to what they might need, and missing the opportunity as a result. So whether you're working for an NGO, for a business, or for some sort of organization, I'm sure you've got a story to tell that could be reaching many people. If you're struggling to do that, if you're struggling to get pitches in, then I really do recommend doing some more research. And even if you are listening to this going, you know what, I do this stuff, please spread the word. Please tell others to do more research. 120 seconds would have been enough for this person to have gotten the show. But I have no idea what they're going on about. I'm not going to reach back to them and ask them to try and help them fix their pitch. I just don't have enough time in my day. I'm pretty convinced with more research being done out there, an awful lot of PRs, and particularly beginners who are probably feeling they're trying their best but failing, could be achieving a lot more. You are listening to the Public Relations Podcast. As I say, if you want to sign up to a newsletter, go to thepublicrelationspodcast.com and then the subscribe button. And then, as I say, that new PR Bites, you're looking for the PR Bites daily newspaper, which I will get underway soon. It'll be Monday to Thursday with tips and ideas, as I say. I think that's the end of the Public Relations Podcast for this week. I have got some more guests lined up, by the way, over the coming weeks as well. Yes, we do take guests. That's it for now, though. Have an absolutely awesome week, and I hope you have so much more success with your pitching if you're struggling at the moment.